All right, everyone. I got another collaboration video for you today. We got Joseph from Joseph Reads Books. He's back on the channel again. A while back, we both read Gateway by Frederick Pohl. And so I think you're the first person, repeat guest that I've had on doing one of these.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And we tend to pick highly award-winning books, apparently.
Yeah.
Because today we're going to be discussing Startide Rising by
I gotta
David
grab my
Brin.
copy.
This is a first printing paperback here from Bantam. And, ooh, I've never...
The Science Fiction Book Club edition.
Is that like both of the books? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Nice. I
both.
haven't seen that before. And this one came out in 1983. It won the Hugo, the Nebula, and the Locust Award, I think the following year, for Best Novel. And, I don't know about you. I didn't know much about this going in besides that it had like kind of sentient dolphins.
Yeah, that's all I knew. I knew that humans were like at the bottom of the totem pole and they had uplifted dolphins. That's all I knew.
Yeah, I understood the idea of like the uplifting portion. We'll get into that a little bit more, but that was about it. And I don't think I was really quite prepared for what this book actually was.
Same.
So I guess first, let's just maybe do a quick overall impression of what you think about it, and then we'll kind of get into what this was about. So you want to start on that?
Sure. I think that the book is very good. I understand why it won the awards it did, because it does. I mean, the concepts it explores are just unprecedented. Like I was talking with Jake from Pulp Mortem when I had first started the book, and I was explaining to him what was happening in there, and he's like, never in a million years would it cross my mind to think of any of those things. He's like, some writers, they just are so far out of the box. It's just ridiculous. And that's how I felt the whole time I was reading it. Every layer just adds more and more to it. Now, like the overall story had a lot of lulls, but I did enjoy all the high concepts. I think it's like the 1980s version of the high concepts from like the 50s and 60s science fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seemed like this book just took it to another level. I was going to go back and see like books that preceded this that had so much science and so many ideas and such a deep plot. I mean, the universe in this is so huge, but you are kind of focused on this story, so you don't have to blow your mind too much. But it really reminded me of like A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge, which came out later. Same kind of massive scope and so many ideas. And then even like Adrian Tchaikovsky, I don't know if you've read Children of Time.
I have. I love that book.
It's like I think those people had to have taken some sort of
Oh, I agree.
inspiration from this, because this was 83 and it was done well. I do agree, though. There were some long parts that, I mean, I'm never one to say he shouldn't have put him in there. It was his book. He could do whatever he wanted, but it was hard to keep my interest through some sections.
Yeah, I definitely, that was the only issue with the book was I did it on audio and I would just have moments where I'm like, wait, I'm still listening to this. Like my mind would be wandering. I'd be thinking about like videos I wanted to make or what I wanted to do later in the day. And I'm like, I'm listening to a book.
I was doing that while reading at times. So we will talk to a later bit in a little bit about some of the books that go around this, because this is a book too, but I did a lot of research ahead of time and people said it's no problem starting with book 2 in this one.
Yep, same.
And so we'll get back to that later, but I guess let's just get into kind of the plot, and I'll start off with this one. So it's like, and you can definitely fill in any gaps that I miss here, but it's like the year 2500, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And this idea of uplift has been going on throughout the whole galaxy, or multiple galaxies. It's not just the Milky Way galaxy. And alien races have been doing this. And then when they ran across humanity, it seemed like we were an anomaly, that we no one knows who uplifted humans or if we were just a natural phenomenon. But we had uplifted a few other species on the planet, like dolphins and apes, chimpanzees. And so this is in the future, and this is like there was a mission mostly manned by dolphins, about 150 dolphins, I think, a handful of humans, and one chimp,
Yep.
all sentient. And they were, I forget the exact mission, but they stumbled across a fleet of these massive ships that no one knew were out there, and they could be linked to maybe one of the first species that uplifted everyone in the galaxy. They find kind of a mummy, and they send a message back to Earth, and some other ships intercept this, some bad aliens. They come after them, and our crew of dolphins and humans end up kind of crash landing on a planet where most of this novel takes place. And then there's a lot going on this planet too. There are some mysteries, there are some reveals that go around this planet, but there is some life forms on this planet. It has oceans. They kind of hide their ship while they're trying to repair it. And there's kind of this galactic battle happening in space above them. And so the setup on this one, I could not believe it.
Yeah.
I was all in just on the setup.
Oh yeah. As soon as I finished like that first couple of chapters, when you finally get a grasp of what's happening, it's just like it's just blown me away.
Yeah, and I should have taken this as kind of some foreshadowing or whatnot, but in the beginning of the book, there is a glossary. It has a list of characters and some of the tech and ideas. It even explains like what uplifting is. And there's even a kind of schematic of the ship that they're on, so you can kind of make sense of that.
Yeah, that would have helped. I did audio only. Luckily, I found like a guide online that had every POV character's name and what their title was, so I could kind of place them. I'd glance at that every once in a while when I got lost.
Yeah, we chatted in email, and when you mentioned that, when if I can like visualize the characters, it helps. And I wish I would have known that ahead of time, because I definitely would have kind of looked at those characters and besides the characters, I could kind of tell who was on the cover here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was constantly like referring back to the glossary because there is a lot of characters in this. There's dolphins, there's like enhanced dolphins, enhanced humans,
Yep.
this uplifted ape or chimpanzee who is
Charles.
quite the character.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's my favorite.
Dart, is that what it was?
Yeah, Charles Dart. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just kind of like doing his own thing through the whole thing. And I mean, you can tell Brin is like an intellectual and a scientist, because even just what Dart was doing in this novel could have probably been a whole novel.
Yeah. I love that. Just a quick aside about Charles Dart. I love that even among other chimps, he's like not normal, which just makes it even better that they took like the strangest chimp possible with them on this spaceship.
Yeah.
It's like that's what we need, is like the one that doesn't get along with anyone of his own kind, let alone dolphins and humans.
They didn't want him on Earth, apparently.
Yeah.
He was like this mad professor who was just like immersed in his work, and there's all this other stuff going on, and he's just like, nope.
Yep, doesn't care. It's like I just distract him with his toys and we'll just do our scheming. Like yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, there was a lot of little like some humor in this book. A lot of interactions between the dolphins and the humans, and you get a lot of content in this one, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's dense. Like just in like not in dense and like a hard to comprehend, just there's just so many layers, like the just layer after layer that he built on. It's just crazy. Like I was trying to think of it like terms of complexity, and I was like, it's more than Dune but less than Malazan. Like that, when it comes to like, because with Dune you've got the one planet and then it's just humans, and yeah, there's factions among the humans, but then like this has uplifted animals, aliens, a war going on above the planet that you're on, and just all these things. And then you don't even get into the stuff about like the libraries
Oh
and
yeah.
that they talk about. I mean, that's super early in the book too. It's just like, oh, this library that we used to reference everything, and every civilization gets it. And then it's like, but is it lying to you? And
Yeah.
then that's a
It,
whole nother layer that just comes out of nowhere. And as soon as that came up, I was just like, oh wow. It's just stuff like that happens constantly in that book. Just these little moments where you're like, this goes a lot deeper than I expected.
yeah. Yeah, that library. So like they have a version of this library, but later a ship crashes on this planet that the our heroes are stranded on. And so they go in to check it out and they find their version of the library and they're comparing it and there's differences.
Yeah, and the whole mystery of that, and it's like, well, who did we get the wrong one, or did they do this on purpose? Like, who's gaslighting us? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's super fascinating. And
That
then he,
I don't know if you've read Fire Upon the Deep.
no, that's on my TBR. I want to read it this year.
And that's one of the main reasons I think it kind of reminded me of it because they had this whole information network that played a big part into it as well.
Okay, I
Yeah.
did read something. They were talking about that. One of the reasons the humans got the library they got is because they refused to speak Galactic. Because it alters the way you think, and so the library is like basically uh like a large language model where if you phrase the question certain ways you can break it, and that's like one of the things that can happen is like you can ask the library weird questions and it will break the library or give you answers that weren't expected. And so I thought that's a fascinating concept by itself. And I mean, this is like we're talking about the library, that's literally like 1% of this novel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I understand why people say to read this first because it hooks you, or it did me. And I eventually want to go start back at book one because apparently that explains a lot about the other alien cultures that you're just getting teased with and some of the back history of everything. Probably more about the library and all that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, this definitely works as a first book because you get you get even though it has such a huge cast, you get a tight story that takes place just on part of this planet instead of a galaxy-wide war or something. And you can feel how big the world is around the events happening, but you don't have to deal with them yet. So
yeah.
I think that is one reason why this works so well.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. And the one fault is there is so many POVs that was even though the plot isn't overly complicated, but you're talking about dolphins here, and I am like, which dolphin was this again?
Yep,
It is hard to picture them or to take personalities and remember who some of these dolphins were. So that was kind of my biggest struggle.
same.
Yeah. And you even get point of views from these aliens that are up in space having this galactic battle. And it is so alien,
Yes.
like at one point they're going to destroy a ship, but they have to like perform a ceremony before they are allowed to blow it up.
That reminds me, the other thing that this reminds me of, and it's like the whole alien hierarchy and stuff, it reminds me of the new James S. A. Corey book, The
Mercy of Gods.
Mercy of Gods. Yeah, because they kind of have a hierarchy among the alien cultures there too.
Hmm.
It's much more abysmal in Mercy of Gods because it's James S. A. Corey, but it feels like they were going for the same thing, like this big universe and all of these different races and just kind of the hierarchy that's built by like the ones in control. And I just thought it was really interesting because they're also kind of battling it out against one another with the kind of generalized knowledge that they're sharing. Because, the premise of that one is like that humans are picked up and then they're biological engineers and they're forced to do something. And that's kind of the whole beginning of the book. And like, I really think that that had to have been, that Startide Rising had to have been an influence on James S.A. Corey. And I know they're
Mhm.
SF nerds bigger than we
Yeah.
are, so.
Yeah, Gateway was, they said, one of their main inspirations for The Expanse.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Then yeah, they're definitely old school SF
Yeah.
nerds.
And the whole idea, just the uplift idea is so cool. Like in the regular order of the galaxies, if you're a race that uplifts another species, you're basically allowed to make them your slaves for like 100,000 years to pay you back in a way before they can be completely free.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And so like when humans contact all these other alien races, humans are like, well, I mean, we don't want to do that to the dolphins. We kind of like them and chimps. And so like there's this there's this hatred almost that the humans aren't really following their rules, and there's still this
Yeah.
mystery of who uplifted the humans, you know. So the
Yeah.
whole
And plus,
concept of uplift, yeah.
like, it doesn't even, like you said, the concept of uplift, it doesn't even get into the ethics. Like, you can't, you can't acquiesce to being uplifted. And then they're like, hey, you can think now and we control your species for 100,000 years. It's like, I didn't agree to
Yeah,
this.
I didn't want to be uplifted.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot around that idea and the way it's structured. And if you think about it, like, I don't even know if you mentioned how many different alien races there were, but if you had the ability to uplift any kind of life, I mean, it's got to be just an enormous amount of different alien species. They talked about some being like bird-like, and I mean, just
Three
random.
different types of birds just among like that group.
Yeah. So I mean, you open up to limitless. I mean, you could uplift moles, in a way, or anything. So it's pretty interesting.
In the book, they mentioned they're working on dogs.
Yeah.
They're just not quite there yet.
And then there's even like this NIS machine. You remember that thing? In
Is that the artificial intelligence?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that the Charles Dart and the human that was in there kind of working with him, they both were messing around with this NIS machine. In the glossary, it says it's a pseudo intelligent computer lent to Thomas Orley. That was the guy, Thomas, by the Timberini agents. So like those were a species of alien that I think were kind of more friendly with the humans. But this whole NIS machine concept, again, another thing you could probably make a whole novel about.
Yeah, I think that's like the key thing with this book is it's like every concept in here could have been its own book, and David Brin's like, I'm gonna put it all in one.
Yeah,
It's just incredible.
yeah, and then I guess so. Like just a little bit more about the plot, because I think the part that stretched in the middle to me was like there's this war going on between a bunch of different galactic races or species, and we got our heroes trying to repair their ships so they can hopefully get away somehow and get back to Earth. But there turns out to be kind of this mutiny among the crew, and the bulk of the novel kind of, it felt like, at least to me, maybe because it drug the longest, but a lot of the middle was kind of all of that happening, and you would get little tidbits of what was going on in space.
Yeah. Yeah, I that is what drug to me too. Like once it really starts going, it's fine, but the build up to it just it feels like it takes forever. All the little all the little interpolitical things going on the ship, and it's like, okay, can I get back to the island or something or space or
Yeah, and then there is some life on this planet that was like completely fascinating about that, and I was hoping he would spend a little bit more time on that, but it ended up being more about this mutiny. And you get to learn how dolphins are, how the relationships work, everything
yeah.
about.
I think he did a great job of making the dolphins their own thing. Like, yeah, they
Yeah,
were uplifted by people, but they have their own culture and their own way of communicating among one another and then among humans to dolphins and vice versa. It's really fascinating that he came up with essentially a language for
totally.
dolphins.
Yeah, they had multiple languages, and flipped in here, you can see these all over the place. They're like little poems when they like revert to their language. It's almost like these little haiku, these little poetry tidbits, and it's fascinating to read that and then take the context out of it for how they're trying to communicate.
Yeah, like with the pervert poet dolphin. Uh, he was a Sahot. Yeah, he was the one that was like, yeah, you're pretty good for a human with words, but never as good as a dolphin. And it's like, I guess dolphins have just taken over the telling of tales. Wasn't that also something mentioned in there? Was like other alien races will take wanted took had hired human writers to tell stories because they were so bizarre and abstract. Like, so they would hire
Yeah.
humans for especially like fantasy novels
Uh
because they
huh.
were horrific and terrifying to the aliens. Which I'm
Yeah.
like, what does that say about us?
Yeah. That was funny. He threw in some little funny things like that.
Yeah, I love those little tidbits are great. Like this is only my second David Brin book, but I'm so impressed by his writing.
Yeah, I looked back. I thought I remembered right, but I went back through your video and we'd both read Postman. So
Yeah,
that's the only other one that I've read of his too. So, and I mean that was completely different than this
yeah, it
novel.
was.
It was so good. It was just a regular kind of post-apocalyptic contemporary style. I think we both just loved that one after
Oh yeah.
watching your review again of it. And then this is like, whoa.
Yeah. This is
Yeah.
like some high concept science fiction.
Yeah.
But not in like an some high concept science fiction is just unreadable, but like this still is approachable. Like it
Yeah.
it has like a coherent plot and like yeah, the cast is too big, but it's still definitely you can definitely get into it unlike some high concept science fiction that's just awful to read or a chore.
Yeah, there's some like really, really hard science fiction novels that, they're just trying to I mean, I don't think they're intentionally trying to sound smart, but they're putting it all out there and letting you know that they're a scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah, very unapproachable. It wasn't overly complex. You could understand all the concepts.
Also
I could,
his writing is just so clean and then it has like these flashes of like brilliance throughout them like some of his prose and it's just great like his writing never gets in the way of the story and then he has
mhm,
just these moments where you're like wow I want to read that part again.
yeah, yeah. And in some of the little poems that the dolphins speak, some of that was, I mean, basically like poetry. And like I said before, it fascinated me how you could pull the context of how they were trying to communicate, and you're like, why don't they just communicate like this all the time? I kind of like this better. It's more
Yeah,
efficient too.
yeah, well it's interesting because even that they talk about that too that it's hard to be straightforward in the dolphins language because it is haikus and there's triple and quadruple meanings to every word and every sentence and you can parse it out and I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot going on in this one. So that's probably all in the plot we want to talk, unless we want to get into spoilers. I could go either way for spoilers. We could just timestamp it and talk about them if you want.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So, and maybe I'll put up a little spoiler warning on the video here or something. But yeah, so I guess where did we kind of leave off? So there was kind of a mutiny going on,
Yeah. The whole
and
thing with that doctor is crazy. The geneticist, like, he's got to be the smartest, dumbest man ever. Let me take these unstable, genetically modified dolphins and I'm going to force them on our crew in space and we'll just see what happens. And one
yeah,
of them's going to be a sociopath. I mean, Orca. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's so crazy. As soon as I started kind of figuring that out, I was just like, hey, there's even more layers to this book. Like,
yeah,
what else has been uplifted and partially modified in weird ways by some rogue geneticist? It's just there's like so much going on.
yeah. You couldn't you couldn't tell if it was like who was who or who had been modified. It was never told until it was like too late or revealed in a way. So
Yeah, like he snuck them on the ship, and then when all the dolphins started having mental breakdowns, oh, it's all the ones with the weird genetics they weren't supposed to have.
yeah, yeah, and so when that other ship crashed into the planet, they end up going and investigating it, and they come up with an idea to basically hide their ship inside of it and take off to appear like they're this alien, ship, and that was going to
Yeah.
be how they were going to get away. So there was a lot going into that, where they were trying to get this thing set up, and that's where they found the library in this old ship, and um, the the main captain, that they do the mutiny on. Forget his name. It was a weird one.
Oh, the he's such a cool character, especially after his brain gets fried.
Yeah,
Uh,
he gets like basically fried, and they don't know if he's gonna come back, and he does end up kind of coming back. Oh yeah, the is it Kiparu?
yeah, Kiparu. Yeah,
Kiparu. Yeah.
that's how they said it in the audiobook. So I don't know if David Brin had gave him feedback or not. You never know with audio.
Yeah. And then there's this like these this species that's on the planet. They they find out that they were somehow tied to another existing alien race, and this Charles Dart, he starts this concept of if a civilization's on a planet and they're like kind of building up their structures and society around fault lines, that after a certain amount of time, the fault lines, as it converges and pushes everything back into the mantle of this planet, it like erases any of the evidence that these aliens were on this planet.
Yeah, that part was just like, oh wow. So now that means that like all of human society could be built on the fault lines of the previous civilization that collapsed into the tectonic plates on Earth. Like,
And erases it. Yeah.
yeah, our progenitors,
Yeah.
which yeah, it's just so
That
crazy.
that was such a cool concept, and that's what our Charles Dart, the uplifted chimp, was like obsessed with. And he
Yeah,
was
and I
like,
love I love that he's like, I'm gonna test this theory by putting a nuclear weapon in the mantle of this planet. Let's see what happens.
yeah. And so there's like so much going on with that, and then so this planet has got like a lot of extra minerals in their oceans, and there's these trees that have these like metal roots, and when the dolphins at one point are like hiding in these caves, they started realizing that there was something else going on with these trees, and it turned out to that was like a mind-blowing concept just
Yeah,
there too.
and
It was almost
and like the messed up genetic modification stuff, like that's like the macro version of what the geneticist was doing, Ignacio Metz. Like the previous race just like genetically modified these things to feed on lava and mine for minerals, and then the rest of the galaxy was like, whoa, you pushed it a little too far with this race, like you need to chill. And so they got like their own planet to themselves, and it's just crazy because like they didn't have a choice in the way they were modified, and then they're just
yeah.
like these permanent slaves to this system, and it's just it's so crazy.
Yeah, and then this species that they find, they're like not really intelligent yet, but they can climb trees, and I forget the name of them, but the humans supposedly they don't think that these things were planted there or whatever, and so the humans are like at one point they're like, well, you get to name them, and now they get to be your client or whatever,
Oh
and
yeah, Toshiro was the one that was gonna have to name them the
uh-huh.
midshipmen.
And they're always kind of like, I don't know if we want to do that. Can't we just leave them alone?
Yeah,
So I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on, but I felt like the most interesting parts, everything we were just kind of talking about, is just kind of teased, and it's more of like during that slog period for me was this, the mutiny between these dolphins and the humans and everything that was going on there. But still, it kept me. I was still fascinated through the whole thing because of all those little tidbits. But do we want to talk about any other things before we talk about how they actually like escape?
Not that I can think of. Oh, I do want to talk about the tech, like the dolphin, the little spider suits, and the fact that they have the little neural implants that allow them to have arms, basically, and it's just so crazy. Who would have thought of this? Who was like, I got these sapient dolphins, so let me give them legs, like robot legs and laser guns, and it's like, oh, one thing I did want to mention is this reminds me of like Star Trek because everyone's relatively decent and it's not violent like the way a lot of science fiction is when it comes to galactic warfare and all that. Like this is an explorer, a ship that's just meant to explore the universe, not conquer the universe and
Mm-hmm.
not go to war with other people. Like they're relatively peaceful and it like reminds me of the Federation a lot, but with dolphins instead of humans.
Yeah, and even at the end, these aliens who were being the most aggressive, they were like, well, why didn't you just give us what you found? Would none of this would have happened? Like this battle we had, like you wouldn't have had to hide. You just had to give it to us. And they're like, well, we didn't want to.
Yeah.
So that was like kind of the only aggression is just like this supposedly superior race thought that they were just entitled to this mummy that could have been the progenitor.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, like they might not like each other, but they weren't like there was no galactic war going on or anything.
And even during the mutiny, like everyone's relatively decent, which, there's usually some over the top aggression between people, but when the mutiny happened, it's like the guy was like, "Well, yep, I've lost." And so they're like, "Here's a ship, go away." And so instead of some like they didn't do something ridiculous like kill him in front of all the other mutineers or something. They there was like a very adult resolution to this instead of some Lord of the Flies type thing happening.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And even when there was deaths, it was like, well, they had to die. They died. It wasn't like,
Yeah, they weren't like reveling in it or anything, and
yeah,
most of the deaths were like accidents.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So then, what ends up happening was the dolphin that was kind of one of the ringleaders of the mutiny. I forget all their names because they were
I'm gonna
so.
look it up. I'll find it for you while you're talking.
Yeah, so he ends up. There's some more aliens that came down to the planet, and when he kind of goes off to, I forget exactly what was it?
It's Takata Jim. That
Yeah,
was
Jim.
the leader of the mutiny with his homie Cathan John, which was the orca sociopath.
And he ends up like kind of inadvertently drawing the attention away from all of our people when they go to leave the planet eventually, right? He's like having a battle. There's the aliens that like land back on the planet and they're
Yep.
running around trying to find him. And I forget exactly what he was doing over there, but it basically kind of drew their attention away, and they were able to like take off in this ship. And then
Oh,
the
that was what's his face? Tom was it who was that?
oh yeah, maybe that wasn't
It
Jim.
was no, it wasn't Jim because they were off on their own. He was it was Tom Orley.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's the one that sent out the signal to
And he got left, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
He's awesome. Like
he
he
was
is
great.
such a cool character.
Yeah. And then so our ship gets up into space, and the main aggressive aliens, they kind of figure it out right away, and they're like, we got to stop them. But the ship that they stole, that alien race, are like, hey, our buddies are back, so they kind of go protect it in a way, not knowing that it was a Trojan horse,
Yeah.
and because I'm thinking like, there's no way they're going to get off of here, and it felt like it was kind of a lucky break, but it made so much sense.
Yeah.
The two ways they got, first just getting off the planet and then getting away from the fleet was just, I thought, done great.
And then the whole thing with Jillian and her like 200 IQ sabotage to Kata Jim's ship, knowing he was gonna try to screw them over. It was just so good.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I sent you the graphic, the glossary graphic thing.
Oh,
I
cool.
sent it over email that way you can use that. It's a lot easier to reference that than than the glossary itself.
Yeah, nice. So, any other spoiler things you want to talk about before we kind of wrap it up? Anything else?
Nope. It's just crazy.
Well, I
So
guess so. What I
much.
will say is, and this is another con, if you read this as a standalone, some of the biggest, highest concepts and ideas don't really get answered. We
No.
don't find out what that mummy is that they found. We assume that they get away back to Earth, but, you
And we
know,
don't find out how who's gaslighting us with the library we were given.
yeah.
And
We don't know if humans were uplifted or not.
yep,
We don't know what happens to Tom on the. He's left. He's stranded on the planet, and he's like eating alien flesh.
they came back for him. It was the little ship. It was
Oh yeah,
the one with Kiparu
yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
and who was it? Denny and Toshiro, like the two humans. They came and picked him back up, and they're like, "We only got enough food for like 4 jumps, and we have to make somewhere between 12 and 16 of them to get home. So I guess we'll see what happens."
Yeah,
It's like, and it just ends like that.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot that happens, but there is a lot left unresolved, and I think, I mean, we can wrap up the spoilers, and then we can go into like whether or not we're going to read more books and overall last impression or whatever. So this might be a good spot, unless there's anything else.
Nope, that
Spoiler.
sounds
Okay.
good to me.
Yeah. So personally, I mean, I feel like I did miss some things in this one, and I definitely want to reread it, and so it's perfect to go back. I think at some point I'm going to start with the first book, Sundiver, get all the backstory, reread Startide Rising, and then the third book, Uplift War. And then he wrote three more after that.
Yeah. I don't know how far I'll go, but I want to at least read the other two in this trilogy.
Yeah, that's definitely where I'm at. I don't know when I'm going to go
Yeah, same.
back to do that. I think it enticed me enough to be like, this was nowhere near what I thought this book was going to be. Super impressed by it. I should have paid closer attention to some of the parts.
It's just so hard to. There's so much going on.
Well, sometimes when I know a book is going to be complex with a lot of characters, I'll take notes on the characters and who they are and try to associate who in my mind. But with this, I was like, hey, I got a glossary. That should be good enough. I still think I could have taken some notes to differentiate some of the characters and some of the little plot lines that were going on, because there was a lot of things happening, and I just didn't pay close enough attention to the things because I didn't realize they were going to play so much more into the plot later, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the book is very good, but it's a lot. I
Yeah.
think that's like the one thing to take away from this is there's so much going on.
And that would be another warning. I don't think I was in the perfect frame of mind because, like I said, I didn't know. I see a cat behind you.
And a dog. Big old dog. Oh,
So,
there she
yeah, when
is.
I revisit this, I'm going to make sure I'm in the right frame of mind and ready to immerse myself into this universe, because I underestimated what he did here.
Oh yeah, same. Like I just after we talked about doing this and you sent me that reminder, I was like, oh, I'm gonna start that. And then I was like, what is happening now? This is not where I thought it was going. And that's why I mentioned the whole somewhere between Dune and Malazan because yeah, it'd be good to warn people. I think I even put that in a review in a book group I'm in, like a little written review. I was like, this has got a lot going on.
Yeah.
So be prepared.
Yeah, and I haven't read Malazan. but I would say, yeah, it's like more than Dune. Dune is there's just like you said, there's only a few main characters. You're not getting so many point of views, and it's not so alien. And also, like
Yeah,
you mentioned, like he did such a good job making the dolphins feel like aliens.
yeah.
So they were
And
intelligent, but they weren't like humans.
no, and we didn't get into the fact that there's different human cultures as well, because Toshiro is from the planet where most dolphins live, and then
Yeah,
like, you know, I don't even know where like some of the other humans are from, but it's just crazy to even get into that there's these subcultures just among this already complex group of people.
yeah. Well, I think we both were probably right around on the same lines with this one, huh?
Yeah, yeah, it's very good, but it's got I mean, I gave it it's like a 5-star read for me with the caveat that there's a lot going on and like sometimes to the detriment, but all of the highs just outweigh all the lows enough that it still pushes over top for me. I understand why it won all three of those awards. Like
Yeah.
it's so groundbreaking and just like what he was going for. Like he went for it with this book, and I can really appreciate that.
And if you look at where all the modern science fiction are these days, I mean,
Yes.
this had to have been super influential
Oh yeah.
for how the genre was going to evolve.
This is like a touchstone of the genre. Like
Yeah. Now I'm torn. I'm thinking maybe like a 4, but
which is totally fair too.
yeah, but I feel like it's my fault. I feel like if I reread this, knowing what I know and was in the right headspace, I think it would be a 5.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm like when it's my fault that I'm gonna dock it, I kind of feel bad about it. But honestly, like yeah, it's somewhere around a 4 and a 5 to me. But I think on a reread in the right frame of mind, this would be a 5.
Probably especially after reading Sundiver and
Yeah,
then going into this and then you really know what's happening.
right. Yeah, knowing all a little bit more of the background. I hope it really gets into the libraries. Maybe someone can comment. Don't like spoil it, but like, do we get to know more about this?
I don't know about in Sundiver, but I was doing some digging and it was like on Reddit or something and people were just kind of giving their thoughts on the series and they do mention that the library is explored at some point. I don't know if it's in Sundiver, but I know that the library is like a key plot point in how humans interact with the library compared to the other aliens.
Mhm.
So that sounds super interesting.
Yeah, at least
Like
as long as we get it somewhere.
this isn't a big spoiler, I don't think, but at some point, like, because the aliens, they have the library, and they're like, well, this is all technology. There's nothing worth learning because it's already in the library, so we just look it up. And there was an alien race that was like, flying machines are impossible without, like, anti-grav stuff. And then he sees like a hot air balloon and he's like, this is impossible. You literally can't fly without propulsion. And then it's like, look, hot air balloon. So just stuff like that. Just the fact that the library itself like puts puts all these species into like the same lane and
Yeah,
they don't bother to look outside of the box basically.
they
It's just
take it as fact. Yeah,
yeah, it's just crazy.
and then someone comes along and thinks different. I mean that has a lot of parallels to humanity.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is fascinating concept. So yeah, so I mean I think this is highly recommended to people. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Yeah, this is one of those books that's easy to recommend to everyone because it doesn't do anything that is going to bother people. Like there's nothing weird or creepy like you get with some science fiction writers.
well, I have
Well, the dolphins are a little weird, a little perverted.
yeah, I have heard some people complain about the perverted dolphins and goose and the women and stuff like that, and
They
laughing
do
about
that now and they're not sapient. So
it. Yeah, you just got to understand dolphins. So
yeah, I guess so.
yeah, but I mean that I don't know. I didn't really take it too seriously
Yeah.
that part of it, but yeah. Other than that, yeah, there's none of the kind of caveats you have to put on a lot of older SF and stuff like that. So
That was another thing is like this was very like even among dolphins and humans there was no weird gender imbalances or anything. Like it's super cool and like that was nice to see too. Because yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of classic science fiction women are just like trophies or objects,
Hmm.
and then this, which granted it is the '80s, but that a lot of people just kind of ignored that it was the '80s and just kept
Yeah,
doing the old school thing. So it was nice to see that it's actually a meritocracy, like for the
yeah,
humans.
yeah. It reads like what you'd read today, pretty much,
Yeah,
along those lines. Where the 70s and even some into the 80s, sometimes you're just like, ah, well, it was the 80s, you know. But
yeah,
yeah, it reads like a current novel. Yeah, and like, yeah, it doesn't feel dated. I think when you have so many ideas that that just still, I mean, however many years later, they still seem so new. And
yeah, yeah. That's the thing is like this could have come out in the last decade, and I would have believed you if you'd told me, hey, this came out in 2016. Check it out.
totally, yeah. Well, all right. Any other last words or anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good. This was awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Like I said, this second time, if you ever want to do any more collaborations or
Yeah, we'll have to do a three-peat.
yeah, something else, maybe Sundiver,
Yeah, so eventually.
find another triple award winning novel to go over.
That's a good idea. I might start looking around, see what both of us haven't read. That's one of all three because there's not very many. I think there's I don't even know if there's 10 that have won all
Yeah, there's
three.
not many. I think I've bumped into a couple more. There might be an Ursula Le Guin.
I hope
But
it's
yeah,
not the
maybe something.
dispossessed. I
What's that?
don't like. I hope it's not the dispossessed.
I didn't like. I read that book like 20 some years ago and gave it 2 stars.
I DNF'd it 3 times. I tried so hard because everyone else I know loves it.
Well, I'm hoping I like it after like being older, but I remember not liking it all.
I love
And
everything else she's written. Everything
yeah,
else she's written is like 5 stars for me, and then that I've DNF'd so many times.
yeah. Well, that'll give us something to look up. Maybe we'll come up with the next one. So, well, thanks
Definitely.
for being on the channel again and
Oh yeah.
going over this one. You brought up some awesome things that I didn't even think about. So, always fun doing this and not just having me sit up here blab.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to be able to bounce things back and forth because yeah, like we both came at the book from different angles and it's great to just kind of mix our experiences and I hope it's really good for everyone that's watching as well.
Yeah. And if you don't know about Joseph yet, go check out his channel. I don't know if you want to talk about any videos you've done recently or anything like that.
Yeah, let me. I kind of forgot what I've done recently. I've been doing like a lot of book hauls and stuff lately. Oh, I did a guide to Roger Zelazny. Like the best starting off point is A Rose for Ecclesiastes. It's 30 pages long, and it is a masterpiece. And so yeah, if anyone wants to check that out, that's probably a good place to start on my channel. Is check out my Zelazny video, and I do have a guide for Zelazny's style as well. That's kind of been my recent binge has been Zelazny and Glenn Cook as usual.
Yeah. And you've finished every Glenn Cook novel now, right?
Yeah, I have. That's also a good thing. If anyone wants to get into Glenn Cook, especially that's interested in science fiction, you could check out my tier ranking because he's best known for the Black Company and his fantasy work, but his science fiction from the mid '80s is just as good as his Black Company novels from the mid '80s. It was incredible to find those. Such a pleasant surprise. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
I think when we did Gateway, you recommended the trilogy, the, what is it?
Starfishers, yeah,
Yeah.
because it has a lot in common with one of the books has a lot in common with Gateway. The Passage at Arms. It's taking place on an asteroid that was
Oh,
mined by aliens first, and then humans found it. So
nice.
it's really interesting.
Cool. Well, great. Yep. So, like I said, thanks. And we'll catch everyone in the next video.